Please give a warm welcome to Maddy Kaudy.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Underpinning is defined by Oxford Languages as a solid foundation laid below ground level to support or strengthen a building. And I think a lot of you know that I draw and paint a lot of buildings, so I chose that. It's secondarily defined as a set of ideas, motives, or devices that justify or form the basis for something. And that is what I'm finding for myself. Before I go on, I just want to thank everybody who has helped me get to where I am today. My mentor, the MFA program director, the graduate teaching faculty and the undergrad students, the MFA faculty, and then all the cohorts, and my friends and family. So I have 3 different modalities in which I work, and I'm going to describe them all to you and tell you how my content and subject matter are kind of interwoven into all of them. This is what I call my liminal process. So I'm interested in cities and the emotional semiotics of light in the constructed world. So I paint a lot of traffic lights, light posts, and lighted windows. These are imagined spaces that are sourced through memory. And I'm also interested in how our experiences of things that are markers in time, which are memories, are things that naturally degrade. This is my representational process, or my representational mode. I source this type of imagery through photograph, and that's, again, associated with like having different experiences through time that I'm remembering and applying a color palette to later, and then I'm also using the photographs to help me render. So this is a highly disciplined process for me. It takes me several hours to create these paintings, and there's a temporality as well here. I'm investigating twilight, which is a brief transitional time when there is this otherness associated with being outside as you think about moving inside to lighted spaces. So this brings up like an emotional response in the search for safety and longing. And that's the emotional semiotics that I was talking about. I try to evoke nostalgia with my choice of color palette. And then my third mode is abstract. So this is a different process from a mind state perspective, where I'm actually kind of engaging in sort of idle philosophical thought and considering different parallel universes, or trying to understand like what makes up the universe. So in a way, these are maps of mind states, and the way that I get to these images is highly intuitive, and it's also what I call iterative, which means that it's a spiritual process where I'm making marks on a canvas or whatever my medium is, or my substrate, and then I'm feeling how it's talking back to me and responding as such. So that involves like a way different mental state. And so when I came here, I thought it would be fun to see what happens when I bring all those things together. And what I call this is intermodal. So when my multimodal changes to intermodal. This is a more holistic expression of my entire process. I have all the different mindsets that go into creating it, all the different types of imagery go into it. And so it kind of satisfies all the things I need to have satisfy me as an artist. Everything in this work is a curation, including my own personal experience of making the work and then the imagery itself. And that's why there's a lot more negative space and a lot more freedom with what I'm choosing. I'm also finding myself cutting through canvas a little bit more and using subtractive practices. So it's a highly freeing way of working for me. I realized too in this program that I archive material. So this is a these two pieces I'm about to show you are large-scale collages on the wall, and I feel like this is kind of where I'm starting to move into installation a little bit more. And so I have this newfound understanding of this practice I have with the negative space, where I'm taking whole images, either in my head or in photographs, and then deconstructing them into separate elements and then reconstructing them. So that's been a really interesting process to figure that out. And I typically work super messy too, although this isn't really showing the huge mess that typically happens in my studio. But this was the installation for this, the second assemblage there. So next, I started to play around with actually moving closer, or moving into physical space a little bit more. So this is the, these are the drawings for Move, which is basically like they're light boxes, light box paintings. So I drew them, I fabricated the wood part, I installed lights, and then I put on the imagery. They're wrapped in muslin and linen. There are prints on here, so I use my printmaking, which is another like highly technical process that I engage in, which is similar to the mindset that I'm in when I'm doing my representational work. And then this piece is all about Minneapolis, the imagery of the buildings I've seen there, the fact that I'm back here after having moved away in 2018 and being in this space again, so it's very much about my relationship to the city. And then blue, when you see blue in this and many of my other works, represents twilight or darkness. These are installed in semi-darkness to allow for the light to shine through the objects, as well as for the painted and printed surfaces to be highlighted. They stretch all around, so there are a lot of elements to look at, and there are also these little recessed worlds which I created, which was also super fun. Another way of kind of layering in imagery, and also a way to have the audience experience of approaching the work and being drawn into it the way that I'm drawn to buildings and drawn into urban spaces at night. My influences are varied, but I'm going to just try to buzz through these. Edward Hopper is one of the things that I love the most about his work is that it invites you to look into windows, so it's slightly voyeuristic. He does a lot of different structures in his paintings, but the lighted window is the most interesting to me. And then Vasily Kandinsky, my dad's here, and he will recognize this painting. My mom had this painting hanging in our house while I was growing up, and I think that well, I've discovered that my palette is very similar to this. And the other cool thing about Vasily Kandinsky is that he worked in 3 different modes as well. So that first piece was a landscape, although slightly liminal. He had this is a liminal cityscape, and then an abstract. So as his career moved on, he found different, he worked in different modes as well. I am a huge fan of Christian Boltanski, so my contemporary influences are installation artists that work with light and how they activate spaces. And then Sarah Z is another installation artist. I'm particularly interested in her because of the way that she incorporates light within the actual structures and sculptures that she builds, and then also has the light reflecting off of surfaces. So how can I get to this? Okay. Oh, great. So this is a little video I made of my most recent work. So I'm calling these 3-dimensional paintings. And the reason I call them that is that the language is really based in my paintings. So these are welded buildings, and then they are covered with paper, and then I fell in love with paper. So I did screen prints based on paintings that I have made. And then I also painted on them and collaged on them. And then I created recessed worlds again. So these are presented in almost full darkness because I wanted to really focus on how the light is shining out of them. And what I'm asking myself with these is, what is painting for me? because there's a lot of ways in which this isn't a painting. But painting is something that is foreground in my practice. And so now I'm thinking about this moment that we're in contemporary art where we're doing, a lot of artists are doing interdisciplinary work and opening up the possibilities of what creative expression can do. And I think for me, like this exploration of materiality has led to this kind of expansion and freedom into how I can build things and how I can create an environment for people. And that's why I'm super interested in continuing in installation. I've always been encouraged to first understand and then learn how to authentically break the rules of the art world. So for me, archiving, collecting, researching, and then assembling disparate pieces of what I've seen and what I remember is what I plan to keep doing. And that's all I have, so I can take questions now. Dave.
So you have your three modes that you describe as discrete things that then come together in different works. In your process, does your mindset change during the studio from day? Is that something that today is one mode and the next day different, or does that become more spacious in, say, one working session?
Well, I think if I had a lot more energy, it would be all the modes every day. But especially with the discipline technical process, that just it takes so much time. So I'm kind of forced to be like prints take 4 hours, at a time, depending on like what stage of the process I'm doing. So most of the time I'm in one. Elizabeth.
With welding, how's that changed your look on your practice?
Welding has made me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt before. And I think it's helped me understand taking up three-dimensional space with objects better. Yeah, because it's like modeling, you have to plan the whole thing. And I learned a lot from that, what I just showed with those. That was the first time I ever welded. Miranda.
Do you have an ideal environment where you would display your work?
I think that what I'm learning now is that the work needs a lot of space so that one can walk around it, especially if it has elements where people are looking into something. So I'd like to consider where the eye level is, and most of the time they're interior spaces, and they're usually places where I can manipulate the light. That's kind of the most important thing. Brock?
Since, your work kind of travels through space and time, you mentioned the fact that you moved to Minneapolis 2 years ago. Does that affect your entire aesthetic, or does that just guide the subject matter that is addressing Minneapolis in itself? Do you get inspiration from Minneapolis for everything, or just for the things that you want to address Minneapolis in?
Well, I think that it's both, because the work that is directly related to Minneapolis has, I'm taking literal buildings, taking photos and then making prints out of them. But I was born here, and the cities that I'm most used to being in are St. Paul and Minneapolis, so I don't think that I could get away from it if I tried. Jamie.
Do you find that the modes, you get to enact them with certain media, or do you find yourself ever working on a project that's due and really not in that mode and having to get creative to get into that mode?
Absolutely. Because it is about mind state and it is about process, I have to figure out ways to, like, strategies to kind of game my own head and make a space for myself where I can get into whatever mode I need to be in. And it can be a struggle. It can take a couple of hours for me to get ready to be in a certain mode to make certain things. So yeah, with critiques and with when there is a deadline, it's both challenging, but also it forces me to make something happen, and it's good practice for me to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. So. Devin?
Why do you think that you tend to gravitate towards liminal imagery?
It feels most comfortable for me. I think that's why, because it's an imaginative practice, so there's an element of recreation to working that way, and an element of intuition that goes into it. But then I'm also drawing on forms that I've seen, so I can take inspiration from something that I've experienced, and it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. If I'm working completely abstractly, it's like it's its own thing, but the liminal space is kind of all of it.
Well, please, a round of applause for